Hello there, Weather Center viewers. This is David back for another episode of Weather Center Nazario. It's been a couple days since our last update, so I figured now is the perfect moment to take advantage of a new opportunity with all the latest information we have on things going on in the Atlantic Tropical Basin. So let's fasten our seatbelts, guys, and let's get on in here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, for the sake of time, we're going to dig right in. So, as always, with every Weather Center Nazario update, we're starting off on the National Hurricane Center's homepage. Today, we've got something interesting to talk about. We have two tropical entities out there, one of which with now a downgraded 10% chance of formation over the next 7 days, and the other of which with 30% chance. I'll go ahead and click on the 7-day graphic so we can get a better idea of where it is the NHC is projecting that they're going to go. Pretty traditional for this time of year, looking at a west-northwest track for our upstream system, as well as northwesterly track for our downstream system. Let's go ahead and transition quickly over to Weather Nerds. I want to take a look at our latest ensemble information. This is going to be the GFS ensembles. Let's go ahead and update. This is pretty spectacular to see, not going to lie. I've been watching this the last couple days. I haven't posted a video on it just yet, but it looks like the GFS is honing in on three separate entities. As our Atlantic high pressure begins to break down, the system that's just barely escaping the African coastline right now as we speak is just barely beginning to make its way off the coast. It looks like the tropical disturbance that's getting ready to exit the African coast right now is anticipated to work its way off to the northwest pretty rapidly as our Atlantic high pressure breaks down with the introduction of new synoptic scale baroclinic features coming off the northeast mid-Atlantic states of the U.S. Our southernmost system is anticipated to follow a west-northwest track around the base of this high pressure, however remaining fairly weak, which is probably why the GFS is predicting a more west-northwest track as opposed to a quick escape up to the north. It also doesn't look like the GFS is really in agreement that we'll see development out of this guy. What I really want to start paying close attention to, especially since there is some faint whispers of it on the Canadian model, especially over the last 3 to 4 runs, is how hot the Western Caribbean and the southern portions of the Gulf of Mexico are starting to get, potentially even the Bay of Campeche next to the Yucatan Peninsula. I'll clear the ink, though, and we'll go ahead and switch on over to the European models, the ensembles, I should say, the Euro ensembles for the same time. We'll take a look at 0Z once it gets loaded up, go to 240 hours out, and there we go. So as I had just mentioned, we're going to keep our focus to the Gulf of Mexico. We even have some member agreement out there as well for something to push off to the west towards potentially Texas, the western extent of the coast of Louisiana. So if I have viewers out there, you guys got to be paying attention over the next 7 to 10 days. See if we get some good tropical moisture up there. Conditions are very favorable for something to deepen, organize, and then kick off to the west, especially since there aren't any major large-scale drivers that would influence a projected path outside of a westward movement. Euro is definitely in greater agreement for our two systems out here to form, though. Still mimicking what we saw in the GFS with our system coming off the African coast now, moving one northwest, and our southern system is a little bit back and forth between a more westward track towards the Lesser Antilles, or curving out, albeit if it begins to deepen a little more rapidly and get the central pressure down, as indicated by some of these members, a little bit lower than what we're seeing as of now. I know the operational run wasn't picking up on any kind of development with that system, at least right now. Icon, I'm going to show you guys the Icon German model real fast. This is the 6Z run, so we're not going to be able to go too far out in time. The main reason I'm pulling this up, not only to save time, but because this has been one of our more consistent models for the last 2 days now. 2 of our circulations highlighted by NHC. Model has been determining that we're going to see development out of both of them at a pretty consistent pace, run to run every time. So it's initialized very well over the last, I'd say, 72 hours. Going forward in time, I'm just clicking through the loop. You can see both systems develop a wonderful center of circulation, and it actually looks like the Icon this morning is predicting that our downstream system closer to the Antilles is going to get a little bit further organized than our system upstream coming off of Africa this morning. So that's very interesting. However, overall intensity has wavered on this model. We haven't seen any kind of inconsistencies or discontinuity with cyclogenesis happening. So I think it's safe to say that this model can be used with a fair bit of confidence. And another model I haven't seen too many folks utilizing is actually the UKMET, one of our more reliable models out from the United Kingdom Forecast Center out overseas in Europe. I'm going to pull that up because I've been paying close attention to that for the last few days now. That's also been a very reliable model platform in terms of its run-to-run consistency. I'll pull up the Tropical Atlantic AOI, and I will use the 6-hour precip. This has kind of been what I've been looking at over the last 2 days now, since about Sunday morning. And once the loop loads, mind you, this is the 14th. I'll go back to the 14th at 0Z, just to give you a representation of how consistent the model's been over a 24-hour period. If you look out over our MDR, I'll go ahead and highlight the area. This is all of our tropical moisture along the ITCZ, our two disturbances, one coming off the coast, the other just downstream over open water. We'll go forward in time, and you can watch that the one system coming off the African coast is expected to track off to the northwest very quickly, but you can see in the UK model that our downstream system is actually projected to stay rather weak, rather disorganized, a large cluster of disorganized tropical convection work its way into the Eastern Caribbean. I'll completely erase my ink, go forward in time, and you can see at the very end of the run, it's approaching DR, Hispaniola, Jamaica at this time. Let's fast forward 24 hours. Take a look at the run-to-run consistency. Before I even change this screen, this is the final loop. I'm glad that it preloaded it. I'll use my red ink. This is where the center is 24 hours now, 15 at 0Z. This is where it was 24 hours ago, the 14th at 0Z. So still anticipated to take somewhat of a westward, west-northwest track through the Caribbean, potentially approaching Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, portions of Jamaica, and even the eastern Bahamas. So definitely something we want to keep an eye out. There is a little bit more thunderstorm activity consolidated on the eastern side. I would assume that there's probably some shear that's resulting in this lopsided appearance, even on the preset model. We'll switch over to vorticity so we can get a better look at what kind of spinach we're seeing in its center of circulation. Forgive me, it's gone back to 0 now. It didn't just disappear, I promise. It's actually back over here now. So we'll go forward in time. Let's go ahead. We'll jump to the end as a matter of fact. And here you go. You can see that it's still fairly disorganized. Maybe a weak tropical depression, low-gauge tropical storm over Dominican Republic at this moment, and still anticipated to track off to the west-northwest, may skirt the coast a la Hurricane Dorian a few years ago. It looks like the UK model wants to keep a very meridional pattern aloft. Our jet is looking very trough, ridge, trough setup. We have a ridge over here in the continental U.S. and a pretty, I won't say sharp amplitude, but a mid-amplitude ridge over the central eastern periphery of the Atlantic. And I think that's why the model is predicting that the weaker storm is going to stay to the south, headed towards the Caribbean, where conditions are a little bit more favorable despite El Nino playing a role. Our El Nino wind shear has not been as significant as we've seen over the last couple months now. I also want to quickly highlight, because once again, this is consistency between models. A lot of folks don't typically utilize UK, at least in most of the videos I watch nowadays. Take a look at off the coast of Texas. I drew a nice little yellow block over it. I'm going to draw some arrows as well, just to kind of reinforce emphasis. Guys, UK is also picking up on something fairly organized working its way into the Texas coast. This is the 22nd of August, which lines up really well with what GFS and CMC is seeing. So that's 3 different fairly reliable model platforms, especially the Canadian and the UK model, picking up on something at least structured to resemble that of a tropical storm moving its way into Texas, wobbling back and forth between Louisiana and the eastern extent of Texas. What I'm going to do next is we'll go over to our Canadian ensembles real quick. I just want to show you guys that before we take a look at the satellite imagery and conclude our video today. Let me switch to the AOI. I apologize. We're still over the MDR. We'll go to the North Atlantic AOI so you get a big picture perspective of what I'm looking at. This has been fairly consistent. The GFS has kind of waxed and waned over parts of the Caribbean and the southern Gulf of Mexico, or at least I should say the entryway to the Gulf of Mexico. But you can see on the Canadian model that that area is primed, and the members are in agreement that something is going to work its way out of the southern Caribbean and head towards the Gulf. From here, I have seen a bit of inconsistency. As it gets through this gateway, some models want to take it up towards the Florida Peninsula, maybe the Big Bend area of the Florida Panhandle. Others want to bring it much closer to Texas, Louisiana, as I just mentioned on the slide previous. So things to keep an eye out for. Let's go ahead and shift gears. I'm going to go back to some live information, some real-time data. We'll go and take a look at the Atlantic satellite imagery, and I may even pull up windy.com just to show you what's out there. I'm going to pull up the Eastern Atlantic, and we're going to go water vapor just to give you an idea. So this is what has been fairly concerning. A lot of us have been shielded and have already sort of let our guards drop because of how quiet the hurricane season has been, thanks to such tremendous amounts of dry air coming off the African coast. This is no longer the case. I'll break out my Epic pen one last time just so I can draw it as what I'm looking at. You can see remnants of dry air out in this area. Unfortunately, this is not color scaled. This is just traditional water vapor. The plumes we've been seeing over the last several weeks, the last 2 months now, June and July, are definitely starting to wane themselves out, especially as we get such tremendous amounts of moisture and much larger in mass tropical waves coming off the coastline. And as a matter of fact, you know what? I'll switch over to red so you can see. I can kind of see some rotating going on in this area here. Nothing crazy. Very broad cyclonic curvature. Look at this bad boy getting ready to exit, plop off the coast right now. This is the one that some of the models are anticipating is going to head due northwest once it gets off the coast into open water. Very interesting stuff, very fun stuff. You can definitely tell that the fireworks show has yet to commence, but things are being put into place. The pieces are moving on the chessboard, as I've heard some of those eulogies thrown around in the past. As windy.com polls up, I will start to conclude my video, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. I leave you with a large-scale, big-picture idea of what the MDR, the ITCZ, looks like right now. And let's see, once the data populates, if we can pick up a spin out there. You know what? It's on the southern side of the ITCZ. This is the surface level. But if you look right in through here, there's some concentrated cyclonic spinning right there where our second wave is, or I should say our downstream feature is. The other one hasn't come off the coast yet. Let me go ahead and go up to 925, see what we can see at that level. And a little bit of cyclonic spinning out there. It's on the southern side, though. That's interesting. I wonder if it's going to make its way through that area of convergence at the surface and then erupt off to the northern portion of the ITCZ and then kick west. Let's go up to 850 and see if we see anything. Going up to 850 now. Let it load, let it load. There we go. So now we're starting to see a bit more of a reflection there. I'll change to yellow ink, bring my pen out one more time, and there she is. There's possible tropical cyclone Emily, still wrapped up in our convergence zone out there in the MDR, but we are starting to see a low-pressure system organize, which despite its ragged appearance on water vapor, not a whole lot of thunderstorm activity with it, and this is just looking at water vapor. I know this is water content, but you can typically pick out convective explosive development going on near these systems at any given time. It doesn't look very organized. It doesn't look very organized, and it's interesting that NHC has actually dropped its favorability over the next 7 days down to 10%. Despite its ragged appearance right now and the variables that are still in play, some of the dry air that may be out there just out ahead of it, we are seeing some deepening. There is some very, very slow-acting cyclogenesis going on because this wasn't there yesterday. We had an extron on the NHC charts, but that definitely was not there when I took a look at it during my late evening live stream yesterday. Looking at this steering flow at 850, I can see why it is that these systems are going to track westward at first, especially our southern system. Northern system, the one that's getting ready to plop itself into the Atlantic right now, definitely can take a northward trek as this high slowly begins to escape off to the east, closer to the Azores up at the corner of the screen. This one, however, as soon as it begins to work its way north of that ITCZ, you can see this strong 850 millibar steering flow. I'll go up to 700 just to give you a better idea. Typically 700 is what we used to use a lot to determine the environmental flow when we were forecasting for Western Conus. And here we go. You can definitely see that there is a bit of a northwestern push in the winds. We have a call out here, a neutral point, which is probably also going to be, we'll say, marginally responsible for this system's push to the north, but there is a lot of good environmental flow off to the west, at least while this ridge is still in place. We have ridging here, ridging here. It's a very low amplitude ridge at this time. I know I'm just basically doodling at this, folks, guys, but I'm letting my imagination spill out onto the canvas so you can see what I'm talking about. With that being said, let's go ahead and start wrapping up. Things are slowly but surely starting to increase in the level of energy we're seeing put into the tropical Atlantic. Will these systems hold strong? To be determined, I think, as we continue to see more influxes of moisture off of the African continent into the main development region, coupled with those temperatures and the lack thereof of significant dust, we will start to see these things hold together and spin off to the west and possibly begin to deepen, typical of this time of year as we really begin to get into the apex of hurricane season. This now concludes the latest episode, the latest iteration of Weather Center Nazario. I genuinely applaud and thank all of you for coming and tuning in. I've been slowly but surely seeing my subscriber count pop up. I've been seeing the view count start to go up. We're hitting the 3-digit mark now, which is leaving me with a very humble sense of satisfaction. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I can't wait to continue to provide you with more up-to-date information, especially as things maybe begin to ramp up for the tropical season. But, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.